thank you for taking the time to look at this video. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you the migration process for a database library. And we here at 9.Connects, when we do migrate components for customers, this is the procedure that we always use. And the reason we do a database library through Excel is it allows us to clean up and prepare the parameters based on the customer's request. And that's what I'm going to do here today. They're actually very easy to put together. And of course, as we always recommend, you don't want to just take a bunch of libraries and throw them into Concord Pro or into Nexus. And by the way, what I'm going to show today will work in either Nexus or Concord Pro. You don't really want to just take stuff that's not cleaned up and throw it in, because all you're doing is taking the exact same thing and you're just putting revision control under it, which means that now every time you make a modification to it, you're going to have to bump the rev. So when you're pushing this stuff into Concord Pro or into Altium, Nexus, and by the way, Altium 365 as well. So whatever those products are, they all use the same interface. Whichever one that you're going to use, you're going to get the same. It's garbage in, garbage out if that's what you're working with. So you want to make sure that your libraries are all cleaned up, prim and proper. So let's assume that you've done that, and I'm going to walk you through a particular example here. So I'm going to bring up my Excel sheet. So here it is. We have this Excel sheet, and this Excel sheet, you can put as much information in here as you so desire. There are certain things you've got to have in here in order for the migration to work, or even for a database to work for that matter, and that really is a symbol and a footprint. Now you can leave some of this stuff blank, however it will not import in. So if there are any blank parameters, they will not import into any of these products here. So that's what we're going to do. But the most important ones that we're going to need to have some type of name. Now this happens to be part number, and that's perfectly fine. You should have a description. You should also have these four things. You need to have a library ref, a library path, a footprint ref, and a footprint path. Now I know it's all over the place here, but let me explain. A library ref is basically a symbol. So what you're seeing here is when it says library ref, you've got your symbols. Okay, this is the name of the symbols in the file. This is the path not only to which directory it needs to go to, but also the name of the library that it resides into. So you can see they don't necessarily have to be in this in the order next to each other, though. Probably would help a little bit just to read this in an easier fashion. If you are going to do what's called a relative path, you'll notice it's a period followed by the path that takes you to that schematic library. The same thing for the footprint path as well. In order for this to work, this Excel sheet and the subsequent dblib file, which we're going to create from this sheet, all need to be on the same directory. So if that's not the case, then you want to use absolute paths. But for our purposes, this will work just fine. So we also have our footprint refs. This is the name of each one of the footprints, and this is the path that will guide you to it. So those are the things that we need to have here. And the other thing you need to do too is you don't want to dump everything into one Excel sheet. I suppose you could do it, but it's a lot easier if you just concentrate on one Excel sheet for every category that you have. Now this is a filter one, and I decided to do this because this is going to be pretty short, and it should be short and straightforward when I do import this in. And so, of course, if you have capacitors, resistors, this list could be rather large, and it does take a little bit of time for it to turn and burn through that. So that's what I've got over here for the Excel sheet, and I'm going to close this. And the other reason I need to close this is because if I start doing things in Altium, with Excel sheets, you can only have one application own it at a given time. So Altium's going to want to have possession of this, and so I want to make sure that it has the rewrite capabilities that it needs. So I'm going to close this out over here. And do I want to save this? I don't need to save it. I think I just changed some of the column widths just so I could read it a little easier, but I didn't change any data in here. So I'm going to say don't save. All right, we are now happens to be in Nexus here. Okay, and so I did use the white screen, or what they call the light gray background. I know that by default it comes in the dark gray, but for viewing purposes, I find that the light gray works a lot better. So that's what we're going to start off with. So the next step is, now that I have this Excel sheet, I need to get it into a DB library format for Altium. So I'm going to go into File, and I'm going to go to New, and I'm going to go into Library. And from library, I'm going to go into database library, not SVN database library. It would work in a similar fashion, but it's a different creature, and we're not going to go into that in this video. So database library, and so you'll get something that looks like this here. Now, because it's an Excel sheet, you more than likely have the driver on your machine. If you do get an issue with the driver, then you will have to resolve it. If you're using Altium Designer 18 and later, they're going to expect a 64-bit driver. A lot of times, believe it or not, even if you're using the Pro edition of Microsoft Office, they're only giving you the 32-bit driver. So if you get an error message over here saying something about the 64-bit driver, then you're going to have to go off and get that 64-bit driver. For this purposes over here, I'm going to assume you already have it. So I'm going to change from Microsoft Access to Microsoft Excel 2007, and I'm going to give it the path over here. So the path that I'm going to go into for this file is, I'm going to go into here. Sorry, let's go down one here. It might be, there we go, all files. Not sure why I filtered out the way it did, but that's fine. So now we're going to go into our filter because we're doing filters here. So I'm going to press OK. And I'll press open. So now it has been brought to the attention, we're linking it into the dblib file that we're creating. Over here, I'm going to press connect. And this is, let's just take a quick look at the table browser. So this is a good sign, so it sees it, so that's definitely good. And then the next thing we're going to do over here is we're going to choose the field. So the field for this one is going to be the key field name. This should be a field that has unique information in it. We've talked about this many times in our other videos. For our purposes over here, the part number is the unique number, so we will make that the key field lookup over here. If you keep these things consistent, you won't have to change any of these things like the footprint path, footprint ref. If you gave them other names, you can fix this here, but then you have to make sure that you're giving it what Altium expects to be as the default name, and I don't want to go down that path in this video here. So this looks all good, and so let's do a save on this. So I'm going to do a file, save as, and I'm going to save it here in the same directory that I'm working into. So bear with me as I navigate to that here. So this one is filters, and we'll press save. Now that we have this dblib created, it's really important that we take a look to make sure the symbols and the footprints are properly linked to each one of the listings in the database library. Because if we go into the migration tool and we try to migrate it and it finds problems, the migration tool is not very good about wanting to change things. It seems that's a bit rigid in that form. And a lot of times if you do have to change something or find something wrong, you got to get out of the migration tool, make the changes, and then go back into it again. So one of the things I'm trying to head off here, as I've learned in a prior example, I want to make sure that my symbol and my footprints are actually associated to the component that's listed in the database library. So to do that, I'm going to go into my components panel here. Let's bring that up here. And I'm going to introduce this as a library. So let's go into file-based library preferences. You can see I've got this one here. I'm going to disable this one. This is the one I did prior to this video. I'm going to install here. And here I will now click on filters. So I now have this one available. I'm going to close it. And I just need to look at the drop down. You can see dblib filters. And yeah, you're going to get this $sign here. This is pretty much Altium's way of saying that this is a database based on Excel. That's what I've always seen them do when it's an Excel database. So we're going to click on this here. You can see that there are 3, so it does recognize it is reading the Excel sheet. This is a very good sign. It looks like the parametric data is coming in, which again I would expect. So if it can read the database, it's obviously going to pull in the parametric data. What I'm more concerned about is making sure that the models are there. So let's scroll down here. So same thing with this one here. This looks like it's here. And this looks like it's here as well. So this is good. That means that this library has its symbols and footprints, and I can move over to the migration side of things. So with that being said, I am going to move away from the component panel so it slides back in, and I am going to close the dblib file. There's no reason to have it open. I could have it open when I do the migration, but just to show you what it looks like when you start the migration without any libraries specifically available in the projects panel, I'm going to go into File, and we're going to go into Library Migrator. Okay, so it's now bringing up the migration tool. One of the things that's going to be really important is the properties panel here. And you'll see this get populated a bit once we add a library. So the first thing it wants to do is to add a library. I believe you can add multiple libraries, but I don't really recommend this. You really ought to bring in things per category. So let's do an add library here, and I am going to click on the filters and bring it open and press open. So it's now analyzing my library. In a moment, we'll see those listings right over here, and we do. So you can see here that there are 3 listings. It is interesting because one that's calling a filter, one a fuse, another one it's calling an inductor, but I should be able to fix these things here in the properties panel. So what do we have here? There's a bunch of things we do need to fill out. And this is why it's important that before you jump into any migration that you already have your Concord Pro or Nexus or Altium 365 set up and ready to go, because there are things here that you're going to want to have readily available for your dropdown. So if we go here to component type, this is the filter. So I'm going to click on this here. The component type here, there's also component template. There are component templates in all 3 of these products. Altium 365, you have to have the Pro version for the template. But these templates guide you when you create new components within the product itself. So you're not making different parameter sets for every single component of a certain category. So it's a really nice feature to have. So the component template's been set. The component type has been set. These are all the parameter fields that we had in our Excel sheet. And you can also change things like text here. So if you want to change it to something else, you could change it. Now I'm picking ones that I can't change, but I could change something like this one here with a text. And you'll notice they give you a lot of other options here. Now, I'm going to forewarn you, be a little careful about this or experiment with this a little bit before you do this, because it is really cool that you can have this, but some of them, these get really fussy. So, for example, if you have something that's like %, the one thing it's not going to allow you to put is a % sign in there. So if you actually put in 10%, it's going to squawk at you because you have the character for % in there. So be careful about just selecting these things. If you're familiar with most of the libraries in Altium, most of us keep these as text anyways, but some of them are nice to put as values because it helps with sorting, right? Because when we normally sort with text, we're doing it based on ASCII value, but we're doing it based on a number, we do it on its numerical value. So there is some value to looking at these types, but for the purposes here, I'm going to leave all these types as text. Another area is part choice mapping, and this is another useful feature. So Altium does have a really great part choice feature. And so what you can do is you can help them out by saying, well, what is your manufacturer parameter and what is your part number parameter here? And you can fill it out. Now, by default, it grabbed part number, and I don't want to use that. So I'm going to click on this here, and it's showing me, again, all of my parameters. So I'm going to pick the first one, which is manufacturer name, and I'm going to change this one to manufacturer number. So you're supposed to have a corresponding group here. Now you can press the add button, and you'll see that it does add this in. Now, on the darker version of these interfaces, be careful because you don't always see this, and if you leave this blank, it will squawk at you. So just don't add in any more here than necessary. Make sure you fill them in. So I do have one for manufacturer 2, so we'll bring that one in, manufacturer name 2, and manufacturer part number 2. So these are all set. The other thing it's going to do is these migrations here. And these migrations, and this is a good thing, so when you do the validate, it's going to look for things that could be an issue, because there are things we don't want to have imported in which we may not be able to fix later on, or they're going to be difficult to fix later on. So this is just the migration check that they are going to perform when we hit the validate. We definitely have to go to the advanced side here. This one's just as important, okay? By the way, if you noticed here, after I changed all the categories of filters, this all cleaned up nicely because these are filters. So Altium takes a guess at these, and that's why over here in the general, you want to declare the component type, say no, what I'm bringing in are filters, and that's what happened here. Oh, okay, on the advanced side. So first and foremost, component folder, we need to tell it where to find it, so we're going to click on this. Again, this is why these products need to be set up before we do the migration. So I am going to go here under components, and I'm going to set up filter, and we'll click on filter, and there we go. The naming scheme should come up appropriately. This is actually based on a property in the component folder that you selected. So here it is. This is component, and it starts with 0001. So we have 5 placeholders, and in this particular instance, we don't want to start on 0. We want to start it on 1. So that's why it's set up in this format here. Here is the level revision scheme, and here is the component life cycle. Okay, so we've got these all set to go. Again, these are things that have to be set up before you do the migration. Check out our website because we go into more detail about these aspects of it, like the life cycle and the revision and the folder structures and so on. This is duplicate detection. So they're saying, look, if there is a duplicate somewhere in this pile over here, there really shouldn't be if we're doing it this way through a database library because you have a unique field. But if there is one, they're going to say, well, which one do we need to focus on here for that duplicate detection? Now we can use name, but probably part number would be more important because that is our key field. So that's what the duplicate detection is doing. We also have to bring in the symbol and the footprint. So we are moving away from a symbol-centric library, right? That's the thing that confuses a lot of people, is that Concord Pro, Nexus, Altium 365 is not symbol-centric, it is component-centric, which means you have a component file, and the component file is linking to a symbol, and it is linking itself to a footprint as well. So that's why we've got to call these out separately, because they're going to be stored separately. So here we have our component model symbols. I'm going to make sure I am in the right location. So where do we keep those? A lot of times people will create a model folder in their component structure so they know where it is. And they'll also put an underscore in front of it so it puts it on the top of the list. So the method that we're using here is I'm going to say probably the most common one that people are using. You could scatter these amongst each and every category, but we find that just is a lot more administrative work to do it that way. So with this over here, you'll see there's symbols and footprints. So here I am going to click on symbols. I'm going to press OK. And then again, the naming scheme I'm perfectly happy with. The revision naming, these are all fine as well. If they're not, you can always do the drop down. And as a matter of fact, there really shouldn't be a whole lot of drop downs here for you. If you've set this up appropriately, you just use the scheme that is going to be best for your libraries, and the lifecycle definition is going to be best for your libraries as well. So you shouldn't have to have a big drop-down-ish thing going on over here. And then lastly, for your footprints, you've got the same thing. So I'm just going to go through the motions of this very quickly. Tell it I want the footprint directory, and the name scheme is fine. By the way, Altium uses PCC. We happen to use FPT. For ours, so if you see a difference, that's just because that's our convention, and you can have whatever convention you so see fit. I guess the only other thing I'll mention about that naming convention is don't get too crazy with it. I think in the past people wanted to have these elaborate naming schemes, but in the end, it just makes things even more complicated, and there's a lot of opportunity for it not to be done right. And once you've given a naming scheme to a component or to a symbol or to a footprint or to any file for that matter, it is permanent. And some people just don't care, and that's perfectly fine because the rest of the information that you have here will do you just fine. But some people really do want to have this to be a little more organized, and they want those to be visible and to be used for search purposes. I find that's a lot more administrative work than what it's worth, but nevertheless, that is an option. But there has to be a naming scheme because it's a database, right? So that's what we're dealing with here. The rest of this information is perfectly fine. So if we go over here, it looks like we are ready to at least validate. So always do a validation first here. And let's make sure everything looks good. So if it comes back with nothing after the infinite circle of patience is complete, then that means that we are good to go at this point. So I'm going to hit the migration tool and let's let it rip. Okay, so it migrated in 3 components and migrated in 6 models. So what it must have found was 3 different, if you think about 3 components, if there's 6 models, that must mean that it has found symbols, 3 different symbols and 3 different footprints. And so that's what we can check here. And that may sound, and that sounds right. Now, if we were doing something like a capacitor, right, and they were all, let's say, non-polarized, then what I would have expected is migrated components, let's say, would be, let's say we did a dozen of them, the migrated models would be far less because maybe I'm using the exact same symbol over and over again. So one thing that Altium is very good about is it does recognize the fact that if there is a symbol or a footprint that matches the name of what you've already got, then saying, aha, you've already got this in here, I'm not going to bring it in again. So let's take a look at the log here. The log is good to take a look at because it shows you what it's doing here. And so you can see that it did create the 3 new symbols, it created the 3 new footprints, and it also created each one of the components. So we're good. So let's take a look at what we've got. I like to do this through the panel, so I'm going to bring up the panel under the Explorer. And once this populates here, we will look at the filter. So let's go here to the filter. Okay. And so we've added in a few things. The filter already had quite a few things in there, but you can see now the number has jumped. So you can see that when we did the initial imports on this here, this happened to be the number here. These are the ones we just put in. So they look good. And I always want to just make sure everything seems to have made its way into the proper locations. There it is. I can also look at these numbers here, and that's about right, what we've got for what we had. So all looks good. So there it is. So hopefully this gives you an idea of how to do the migration. You are going to come across various things. It doesn't always go as smooth as it really goes with this here, especially when you're dealing with a large number of components. But the key thing really is to make sure all of this stuff is set up and to make sure that when you're putting together your Excel sheet that you're being vigilant about the symbol linkages, the footprint linkages, and just the consistency. So thanks for your time, and we'll see you in another video. Take care.